Bum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-da-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum.
Welcome to Everyday Musicality, the podcast in which we discuss all things related to Gordon's music learning theory and how it can help unlock the inner musician that lives inside of all of us. I'm your host, Heather Shouldice, music educator and faculty member for the Gordon Institute for Music Learning. In this episode, I have a conversation with two experts in music learning theory-based piano teaching, Krista Jadro and Hannah Mayo. Hello and welcome to the Everyday Musicality podcast. Today I'm bringing you another guest episode, this time with two special guests, Krista Jadro and Hannah Mayo. Krista and Hannah host their own podcast about MLT called Keys to Music Learning, and it's all about incorporating MLT into piano teaching. I've really enjoyed listening to Krista and Hannah's podcast, and I know they're very knowledgeable about applying MLT in the piano studio, so I invited them on to talk a little bit about it. Here's my conversation with Krista and Hannah. I am thrilled to introduce two special guests today, Krista Jadro and Hannah Mayo. Welcome, Krista and Hannah.
Thank you so much for having us today.
Yes, it's so great to be here. I'm totally honored.
Oh, and I'm totally excited. Thank you so much for making the time. I know you both have a lot going on, so I really appreciate it. So, could you start out by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm Hannah Mayo, and I'm a pianist and piano teacher living in Lafayette, Louisiana. And I teach piano in a variety of settings, and I also teach early childhood music at a preschool, and it's all using an audiation-based approach with the Music Moves for Piano method. And I recently joined Krista at the Music Learning Academy team, and I do lots of webinars and fun things like book club, and it's just been really awesome at Music Learning Academy.
And my name is Krista Jadro. I am the owner of Music Learning Academy. I teach online courses and study groups about audiation-based piano teaching and music moves for piano, and I work with wonderful people like Hannah Mayo. I also have a lovely studio of piano students that I teach at a local community music school. I live right outside of Boston. I've taught early childhood music there, as well as many other things in the past, but we'll focus on the piano today.
Great. So one thing I like to ask all guests is how you got into music learning theory. Could you each tell us a little bit about how and when you discovered music learning theory?
Definitely. I also like to know everyone's story about music learning theory because it's such just a pivotal moment in so many people's lives. But the first time I was exposed to Edwin Gordon was as a grad student. I read a book called A Music Learning Theory for Newborn and Very Young Children. And because I was doing my big final pedagogy project on music and piano for preschool age children, so I was trying to learn about the littles. And I didn't understand a lot of what I was reading at the time, but what I did understand, I could intuit that it was like this special wisdom, and I just didn't know what to do with it for a really long time. And then I came to learn about music moves for piano, and I got really into patterns via Marilyn Lowe's pattern CD that comes with her method. And it was the patterns that convinced me that I needed to just start like devouring Gordon and really go back to it, try to understand it, try to make sense of it, try to apply it, and then also just to try to reach out to the community of MLT people and start learning from them.
And I have Dr. Suzanne Burton to thank for introducing me to music learning theory at University of Delaware during my undergraduate years, which was almost 20 years ago. I almost immediately knew that this was how I wanted to move forward with my teacher career. And I say almost because I really had to get over that shock that there was just a lot that I had to learn to audiate. But I was just so lucky. I had Dr. Burton. She took me under her wing. She helped me plan early childhood classes and even music moves for piano classes. That was the first time I had seen the method at the community music school there. She encouraged me to join and really become active with GIML. She supported my undergraduate and graduate research and took me on as her graduate assistant. So I have so many great memories of my early days in MLT, and then just lots of great memories from then till now.
Yeah, I think actually, it's probably been 15 or so years since we met, Krista, when we were both, I think we were both chapter presidents for
Yes,
GIML.
we were, and then I served as secretary for a number of years too. So that's where I met a lot of you.
Yeah, it's a neat, intertwined and overlapping family that we have in the music learning theory world. Yeah. Well, I wanted to get the two of you on the podcast specifically to talk about piano applications of MLT, because I think there are a lot of people who are familiar with MLT, but maybe aren't so familiar with how it can live out in the piano world. So could you talk a little bit about why MLT is valuable for the piano world? What do you think it brings to the table that other piano approaches or methods don't?
I'm going to start because I have used many methods, and Krista is lucky enough to really just to have started with music moves and stuck with it for so long. So I have seen lots of piano methods, and something that is different about music moves and the MLT approach of it is that Marilyn was able to create an entire method without notation, or with very little notation, or notation is used for the teacher reference, not to teach the student. And that was just never done before. Like, you can't find a piano method with zero notation for the student. And for her to do that so that our students can really focus on their audiation and then come to reading later, we talk about this all the time, about kind of like putting reading where it belongs. And she did that. And she also really took the sequence and just made it very detailed. And you really have to study it and get used to it. But if you do it, it works. And like, I could really go on for days about this. Mm-hmm. But another thing that maybe isn't so piano specific, but I think that it really would probably resonate with a lot of piano teachers. We have this kind of culture of, accuracy as of utmost importance, getting it right, being a little performer. And, there's a certain kind of pressure, I think, in the piano world, because a lot of what we do is supposed to be done from memory. And, that triggers a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. And, with audiation, it has just sort of like turned music making toward the right direction, I think. And it's for the 21st century piano student also. Like, I really could say so much about it. But the last thing, and then maybe Krista has some things to add, but I think that it also has brought me like a new sense of empathy and patience for my students, because now I'm having to like go back and learn all this new way of thinking, a way of teaching, a way of being with music in all of these different scenarios. We have to learn the pattern vocabulary, and we have to learn the songs to sing and how to identify their parts, and we learn all these different tonalities and meters, and we learn about this amazing theory that was developed over decades of research and insights. And it was just like a way that I had never thought about music before, even in like decades of piano lessons and music school and advanced degrees. And all of those things had value, but I was thinking about music in just such a different way. And then here comes the learning sequence, and it has the capacity to like help you understand why students can't do things, or it helps you understand that everybody is born with different kinds of aptitude and different potential. And that gave me this whole new patience. So when a student can't do something, instead of me getting frustrated or blaming them, which happens in piano lessons a lot, we blame our students for the things they can't do. Maybe that happens in all of music, probably. But instead of blaming them, I can look at the learning sequence and say, where is the readiness hole? Like, what happened? we fell down a hole in the readiness chain, and we need to come back out of the hole. And it's more like I'm calmer, they're calmer, and I have the MLT toolkit to really help me empathize and be patient.
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with Hannah on everything that she just said. MLT is so valuable for the piano world because of those readinesses. I think that's really important when any of my students become frustrated about anything, which actually really doesn't happen. But if they were to become frustrated with something, or if I'm saying, if I ever say no, I say, okay, this is because I didn't prepare them for what I'm asking them to do. And I know exactly how to step back, look at the big picture, look at what might be missing in the sequence or what they might need more of, and guide them, right? Guide them to be able to do what I'm asking. And also, Hannah mentioned that potential, and I think it's just so important that all of our students have the potential to learn music. Using MLT with piano, it's for every student. All of our students can learn to play piano. It's not just for the talented or the few. We can teach our students, we can guide our students to learn how to play and enjoy and improvise and create and make their own music on the piano.
Yeah. I was really struck by, in listening to both of you describe the value in MLT in the piano world, how it really, basically, the common thread in what both of you are saying is it's much more focused on the student, less on, I'm the teacher, I know how to teach, we're going to do A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, and if we stray from that or if that's not working, it's the student's fault, like Hannah was saying. And instead of that, it's opening up possibilities. Mm-hmm. Focusing on the student and what they need rather than thinking that we as the teacher know what they need. Yeah, exactly. That's great. So if there was a piano teacher who wanted to start dabbling in MLT in their piano teaching, what might be something you would suggest for them to try starting with?
So I would suggest maybe taking time away from the piano to develop audiation skills, perhaps even starting with just listening and movement. So, for example, maybe take a piece that the student will be learning in the next few weeks, play that piece for the student as they move with flow, with continuous movement. And if that's new to the student and they're hesitant to move, because that does happen, especially if they're older, tell them maybe to stretch or just listen and roll their shoulders, move their head in circles, roll their arms in front of their body, anything to get them moving and flowing through the music. Because as we know, movement is so essential for music learning, and listening to a piece that they're about to play with that movement, whether they're going to be playing it by rote or through notation, it's really going to activate the ear.
Yeah, and I would say that for the teacher, listen to all the podcasts that are coming out. And also read Clarity and Comparison, or Clarity by Comparison, a bedtime reader for music educators by Dr. Edwin Gordon. And I love this book so much. You need to read this book. And it's so much, it's more easily digestible than some of Gordon's writings, and the comparisons, all the comparisons that he makes, like, really clarifies some of the core tenets of MLT in a way that the other books just don't. And he says that in the introduction. And so, like, especially if you were ever put off by any MLT or audiation talk, that's a really good book for teachers to read. Any music educator would benefit from it. And then also, like, specifically for piano teachers, I would say to try first with the keyboard games, which is the primer, you could call it, what we would call the preparatory audiation books that go with that phase of the music learning process for the musically young. And that means chronologically they could be any age, but like I use keyboard games and I just sort of rebrand them for even college students and adults. And so I would just say, like, start with a couple of keyboard game pieces as like a warm up, or right after you do your movement that Krista talked about, you could go into 5 minutes of that and just kind of focus on like technique and using them to learn the rhythm pattern vocabulary, and just kind of start out with the do days and the do dotties and just sort of ease in via keyboard games and just see how you like it. See where that takes you.
Yeah, because you do want to jump in with something, but just know that it doesn't have to be everything. You can start with a little bit of dabbling, and then as you learn more, add more.
Definitely. I'll remember to link to all of the resources that we are talking about in the show notes in case any listeners want to check those out. And I've actually never read, was it Clarity by Comparison?
Yes, it's so good. You must read it.
Yeah.
It was
I'll have to check that out.
It was our opening book for book club last summer.
Fun.
We had some really good discussion.
Absolutely.
Also, more towards the end of our discussion, we'll have an opportunity to chat about things like your book club, about the podcast that the two of you host, and about Music Learning Academy and other things that you both have going on. So that's coming, listeners.
Sounds good.
Okay. Next, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you meld teaching from an MLT perspective with teaching in a more traditional way. How can we make those two things come together?
Okay, so this is an interesting question because you kind of can't. And I've tried, you can and you can't. So let me start here. When I decided that I was going like full on MLT, it's just like the more I taught lessons and the more I did it and the more results I saw, any time that I would sort of like go back to the old way, or a way that was not about audiation or movement, and it was more about like just trying to cram the right thing down the student's throat and get it, get this product out really quickly, like maybe because I'm under a deadline, the student's got an event to play for, whatever it might be. Any time that I went back and reverted, bad things happened. Like, it was painful, the student wasn't happy, I wasn't happy. And so that happened enough times for me to finally go, I'm not going to try to marry anything. I'm just going to let MLT be what it is. I'm going to follow this book. I'm just going to sort of live here now. And so I have been slowly phasing out remnants of that world. and that, like I don't do certain events now and I do other ones instead, or I do these kinds of recitals and not those kinds of recitals, or just stuff like that. And then I would also say, as far as like traditional, quote and air quote, traditional music teaching, piano teaching goes, if you really go back far enough, like to the time of, I'm talking like Bach and Chopin, Beethoven, like all of these big composer names, they were also teachers. And I don't know if they were good teachers. My thinking is that Chopin was probably a pretty good piano teacher. But if you go back far enough, they were not using piano methods. They were just teaching, and they were teaching a lot of it orally. They were teaching their students just how to play, and they were teaching their students to sing, and probably, I'm guessing, I think they probably did a lot of singing. And they were teaching in the way that we kind of teach now, using music moves and the audiation-based approach. And so when you talk about marrying traditional, I think we're actually going even farther back in history and sort of bringing some of those things back. And if I remember correctly, I want to say that Gordon did an interview where he kind of talked about this same thing. And like, it feels like music education has kind of done this slow, steady path to notation being the ultimate. And like, yeah, it's really important to be a literate musician, of course, but that's not the only thing. And that actually stifles audiation in the early stages. And I think probably intuitively, people of the past knew that. And that's why they just taught students how to play first before they taught them how to read. And that's what Music Moves does. It teaches students how to play first before it teaches them how to read, using everything that Gordon came up with. And Marilyn took all that stuff and just put it in the books so beautifully. So that
Can I interject just for a quick second?
Yeah.
Because what you were just saying, it just fascinated me and got me thinking kind of down a tangent when you said, we've gotten so fixated on notation, and now, like, with the audiation-based piano approach, like, we're really moving back to, what you're kind of surmising music may have used to be. And it's interesting to think about that in relation to the evolution of music education, at least in the United States, and, like, the influence of things like the printing press and like publishing companies, and how that has so gotten its claws into music education. And it would be neat. I'm not a historical researcher, but it would be neat if someone did a historical research study looking at that, trends of music notation and publishing, and looking at how that intertwines with changes in music education.
I think about that a
doing
lot.
A historical study.
And I'm not a historical researcher either, but my best friend is. Maybe I can get her to do it.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I just had to put
I
that
think
out there.
that's really it. There are times where in my own teaching, I would look at an activity that was pre-MLT, and I could say that activity can stay. Maybe with a little tweaking, or maybe it can just stay because it fits with the lens that I'm using now. And like, that's okay. I'm not just gonna throw everything that I've ever learned out the door because I'm trying to use an audiation-based approach now. But I've gotten so much more comfortable abandoning things that don't fit. And I'm okay with that now. I used to try to like meet everybody in the middle and be like, no, you can do this. And I still am happy to find middle ground with people. But for me and what I'm doing with my students, I choose all in.
Yeah, and I feel like that is kind of a hard truth, that, to really lead our students to a full musical understanding, to lead them to see notation and hear it and understand it before even going to the piano. I do believe you have to follow the sequence from the beginning, all the way from preparatory audiation. That is the way that we are going to get them there. But we don't want this to be off-putting to anybody who is teaching in a more traditional way, because you can definitely start to supplement with audiation-based activities, and that is going to be beneficial for your students. So even if you do the movement or the listening, or start to extract patterns from whatever pieces they're playing and improvise with them, that will be helpful for your students. So if you're not ready to jump right in, if you're not ready to dive all the way in, then there are still activities that you can do with your students in your teaching that will be helpful.
I also just want to do like a quick follow-up. I think that a lot of teachers, what they're doing is probably like totally working for them. And if what you're doing as a piano teacher is absolutely working for you all the time, and you are satisfied at the end of every workday, if you are loving your life as a piano teacher, then keep doing what you're doing, whether it's audiation-based or not. But for me, I had a lot of pain points, and I really needed to deal with those pain points. Like, I was getting ready to give up piano teaching. I was entertaining that idea, which, if you know me, you just can't even imagine that. So, if you are a teacher who is looking for something and is not quite satisfied with where they are and the materials that they're using, and they think that there's something maybe out there for them, this is probably it.
Yeah. You sort of answered, at least started to answer the next question I was going to ask, which is, what might you tell someone who's teaching piano from a more traditional approach, who may be a little bit skeptical about MLT. They might be hearing the things that you're saying and going, I'm not so sure about this. I don't know if I need this. What might you tell a teacher like that?
Yeah, I think we all kind of started there, right? We all had a little bit of skepticism when we started with MLT and when we opened up the Music Moves for Piano Materials.
And fear.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so different. It doesn't look like any other methods out there. If you're using Music Moves for Piano, even with MLT, we're doing things that we may have never done in our musical upbringing. And I guess even if it does make a lot of sense, it turns what we think we know about teaching upside down, right? When I talk to teachers, I do find there's a bit more acceptance with the younger students. Music is an oral art, so starting away from reading notation, where the younger students especially might get frustrated or bored, that's easier to understand. Many kids love to move and sing and chant and improvise to create, so lessons that include these elements, like keyboard games, they really are a great fit, and many teachers can see this, even if they're a bit nervous to begin to implement it. I think the skepticism really comes with what to do with the older students, particularly with reading music notation and advanced literature and skills.
Yeah, and I think those are the two probably biggest points of skepticism are like what's going on with their notation and when do they do it and how do we do this with, the high school students who are playing Mozart sonatas. And so I'll start first. Like I would like to touch on the reading part. And I used to say that we delayed reading notation until the brain starts to think abstractly. And, if you're an MLTer, you already know what I'm kind of talking about here. But now, once I heard Marilyn Lowe say, no, we're not delaying anything. We're optimizing everything. And we're putting like things in their place. And my favorite example is the music alphabet. Okay, and I don't... This could be a fun sentence I'm about to say for like a piano teacher who is more of the traditional way. I do not teach the music alphabet. I know that there are piano teachers who spend at least 5 minutes of every piano lesson from age 5 to 7.5, making sure that their students know the music alphabet forwards and backwards. I threw away all of my alphabet cards. We do not make alphabet snakes anymore because I would rather spend that time singing and chanting and flowing, and because I now know that that is the optimal time to do that. The optimal time to teach alphabet letters comes later. And it's little things like that, like things that you think you're doing right, and then what Krista said, MLT sort of like turns that on its head and tells you all these scientific reasons why that's maybe not the best choice. Excuse me. So we do read, and my students read great once they get there, and they read with understanding. They read better than they did the old way. But we just have to be so patient. And a lot of teachers are just not ready to be that patient for the reading. And that's okay. That's okay. And as far as advanced literature goes, I use the same process for Mozart and Beethoven and Chopin and beyond that I use for keyboard games and book one little 4-measure pieces. And the reason for that is because it's all the same. The learning sequence is the learning sequence, and it works whether you're talking about beginner level or advanced level. And I've had students learn entire advanced works with very little use of the notation. Like I've basically taught it to them and gone through the learning sequence activities with them the same way I would for a 1-page beginner piece. It just takes way more time. And it takes a lot more conversation and a lot more, you really have to think it through. The teacher has to learn the pieces along with the students. That's something that I have learned. It's like every advanced piece, any piece that a student has learned, I have had to also learn it so that I can identify the rhythm and tonal patterns and the keyboard geography and be able to talk to that student about it using our kind of like learning sequence language. But it totally works. And I think that the thing that teachers don't see right away is like this big picture. You know, they get exposed to like a little tidbit of MLT here, and they get a little bit here, and they get kind of piecemeal MLT things, or maybe they're asking questions in the Facebook group, but they haven't quite seen the big picture, like lifetime musical timeline, big picture. And once you sort of see that, you kind of get it. But it took me like 4 years to see that, like from the time I started. It took me a long time. And you just have to be patient. I had to be patient.
That's great. This wasn't something I had planned on asking the two of you, but you've referenced the Music Moves for Piano materials quite a bit. For listeners who may be unfamiliar with those materials, or maybe what's available or how they're structured, could you just give a quick run through of those materials?
Sure. So Music Moves for Piano is, as we know, the only method that was created by Marilyn Lowe that is entirely based on music learning theory, follows the sequence of music learning theory, and is audiation based. And I was going to mention before too that when you're a piano teacher, it's a bit different than other MLT, maybe we can call them teaching scenarios. So we have early childhood teachers who might also teach one other instrumental or elementary general, but then we have the elementary general teachers and instrumental teachers. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think piano is the only kind of scenario that we see students from 4 years old all the way through 18 plus. We have them through the entire learning sequence. We have them through, they're starting with us in preparatory audiation for a year or two as they transition from, preparatory audiation to formal instruction. So Marilyn's method covers it all. It brings Keyboard Games is the first book, and that is preparatory audiation. You can use it with a student as young as 4 years old. If a student starts at 4 with Keyboard Games, they're typically in there, I would say, for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, depending on the student. Even older students should start with Keyboard Games. You just use the materials a little bit differently. And then formal instruction begins with book 1, and she's written books 1 through 5. By book 5, the student is likely in high school, playing all sorts of advanced repertoire. By then, they're also reading and writing music notation, and Marilyn does have reading and writing books as well. And by book 5, they're using that more as a workbook, but they're learning all the different tonalities. They're learning all the different meters as well. So really, it pushes the students and it pushes the teacher. I learn right along with my students as I'm bringing them up through these books. It's quite amazing how just teaching this, even though I've been doing music learning theory for a long time, and all of my classes has been music learning theory based when I was teaching in general music and early childhood music. But my ear has grown so much teaching my students these piano books. We really owe a lot to Marilyn because it's brilliantly put together. And I don't know, Hannah, do you want to add anything about the Music Move series?
I think you said most of how I feel about it, but it has really changed my life. And I know that sounds just so like, yeah, right, sure. But it really saved me in a lot of ways. But yeah, I totally agree with Krista. Marilyn took MLT and laid it out across these 7 main books, 2 preparatory audiation and or informal guidance, and then 5 formal instruction books. And then once you get about midway through the formal instruction book, you start in reading and writing books. There are 3 of those, like Krista mentioned. And then the only other set that she did mention were the well-tempered readers. When students get to a place where they are proficient enough with their skills, they can start to independently answer all the questions that one needs to kind of think through before reading a new piece, and they use those books to learn that process. There's a very in-depth music analysis form that the student fills out every time they start a new piece. They add their own dynamics, and the idea is to include dynamics and articulations that are in the right style of the piece. So to get the student to sort of be able to provide the musicality of the piece without seeing it in the score. And, she's just done things. Maybe I did have a lot more to say about it. She's just like put together all of these different experiences. That's like when I am working through the Music Moves method, I feel like I'm experiencing piano playing and I'm experiencing music making more. Before, with other methods, it kind of just like, I'm just going through these motions and I'm just going to turn the page and wash, rinse, and repeat. And so that's really it. She's creating a learning experience that's really valuable.
That's really helpful. Thanks for giving the overview about the materials. And I think that's also helpful, the point that Krista made about that both of you have made, that we continue growing in our own musicianship while we're teaching with music learning theory. I think that's really helpful for everyone to remember, especially those who are newer to MLT, that it's okay if you don't know everything at first. And if you're not, if you feel like there's holes in your own audiation, that's totally normal. And I think that's also part of the beauty of MLT, is that it keeps us as teachers engaged in learning and growing musically too. So Thanks for making that point. So now that you've described the materials a little bit, particularly that notation is delayed in these materials.
Optimized.
Do you ever have... Oh, sorry.
Yes, we have
the better terminology. Okay.
Optimized.
I wasn't aware. Okay. Since notation is optimized, put in its appropriate place in the sequence. I like that. Do you ever have students or parents who question this approach to music teaching and learning? And if you do, how do you handle that? How do you help them understand why things might look or sound so different?
Yeah, of course we do. My go-to really is that language learning, music learning analogy, which I'm sure many of the listeners are familiar with, and I know you've covered in a previous episode as well. And for those that might be unfamiliar, this is really what I explain to parents. When learning language, we develop our 5 vocabularies: listening, speaking, thinking, reading, and writing. Language learning starts with listening, absorption of the sounds of the language and the inflection of the speaking voice, eventually developing the ability to identify and discriminate sounds to build a listening vocabulary of words. The speaking vocabulary starts with babbles, then imitating of sounds, first with no meaning or understanding, but eventually, with that thinking vocabulary, meaning is brought to the words that are heard and spoken. The words are then used to communicate thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs, and this is a process that needs to happen before reading and writing, if we want reading and writing with understanding. This makes sense to parents. This makes sense to caregivers. The more experience and practice children have with listening, speaking, thinking, and communicating, the more understanding they will bring to what they read and write. Then I compare this to music learning. When learning music, we develop those same 5 vocabularies: listening, speaking, which includes singing, chanting, even playing the piano, audiating, which is thinking, reading, and writing. Listening is the foundation of music learning, which makes sense to many parents because music is an oral art. It is best developed in a rich musical environment, including singing and chanting, lots of repetition, lots of movement, and giving opportunities to discriminate sounds and start to form a vocabulary of tonal and rhythm patterns. And as with language learning, the speaking vocabulary starts with babbles and with imitating, first with no meaning or understanding, but eventually, with that thinking, audiating vocabulary, meaning is brought to the musical sounds. Meaning is brought to the tonal and rhythm patterns that are heard and performed. Then improvising allows one to use those tonal and rhythm patterns that were accumulated in the listening and speaking vocabularies for musical expression. It's all about developing those first 3 vocabularies, which is why you often see the vocabularies placed in a pyramid, because they are the foundation. The more experience and practice children have with listening, singing, chanting, playing the piano, auditing, improvising, creating. The more they do this, the more understanding they will bring to reading and writing music notation. And I have to be honest, I have lost a couple families along the way. Either they didn't fully understand it or believe it, or they wanted their children to learn in a more traditional way. And that's okay. It just wasn't the right fit. But right now, I am in an amazing place with a studio full of families that get it, that enjoy seeing the progress their children are making, and with students that are just having fun and learning music together.
What I did is took an idea that I got from a PDLC from a Gimmel faculty member, Jenny Fisher. She would educate parents a little bit at a time and give them, as they're leaving the class, she'd give them a little half sheet with some bullet points about what's going on and what things that they can do to help support at home, and to explain things like, when we expect students to start practicing and how we shouldn't push it. And, it was just like parent education in little doses. And so that's what I took. And I ran with that, and I took all of her ideas and put them into like a little parent booklet. And so I send that, like the very first lesson, like any young student, their parents will get this little booklet that is like beautifully laid out, and there's a lesson. There's 10 lessons for at home. They can read like one each week, and that's how I did it. And I also did part ways with a couple of families a while back when this all kind of got going, and I officially was like making the transition to MLT and audiation based teaching. And one student was kind of put off by the whole moving thing because that was very new, and another student was just a lot of my students, I think when I lost them, I think they were already kind of ready to go, which says more about the old way I was teaching. And then there was like this new big change. And even though the new big change was a change for the better, of course, they didn't know that and couldn't see that or feel that right away. So I did lose a couple of students because of the change, but I think I was probably already going to lose them because, you can just sort of tell when it's becoming the end of the teacher-student relationship and it's time to move on. Like when the student doesn't want to play the piano, they want to play the drums now. Okay, that's fine. So yes and no. I'm not sure if me losing students, and I've never really thought about this until right now. And I'm kind of having this moment of maybe it wasn't that. But I will say that I was not very good at it at the beginning, and probably a lot of people have felt that way too. And I wasn't very efficient, and I kind of felt like I was stumbling all over myself a lot of times when I was teaching. And, that's just like paying your MLT dues. I think that's just what it is. You just have to suffer through that. And probably the lack of efficiency and confidence is probably what students felt if they felt dissatisfied with anything. But now that it's it's everyday musicality, and it's just like a part of our lives. Like, my students love their lessons, and we're all very happy now. The old ones, the young ones, everybody is doing very well. And even when they don't practice, they still make gains because of the method and the theory behind it.
Yeah, so kind of relating to what you were talking about earlier, rather than blaming the student if they didn't practice and assuming that, the lesson time is just lost because you didn't prepare, there's always more growth that can happen.
Absolutely. That was a big change for me, knowing that I could still have a valuable lesson. And I don't even ask anymore a lot of times. I've just stopped asking if they practice. Or I might say something like, "Did you play the piano this week?" And I don't like to use the word practice anymore because, practice is a very heavy-handed word. And, it comes, I know it doesn't mean all of these things that we associate with it. like it's pure definition, but practice, especially in the context of a music lesson, to hear the word practice is like you tense up, like I didn't do enough practice, or I haven't practiced today, or my teacher's gonna know that I didn't practice, and like I don't really want to practice, or and I'm ashamed about that. It's like practice, the word itself just holds a lot of tension. So I just stopped using it.
And there's
that. Go ahead, Krista.
Sometimes there's a little skepticism from parents too, when they're like, okay, what should I have them practice? And I'm very similar. I'm very similar to Hannah, and I give them ideas to practice at home, but I am okay. I am saying this. I am okay if they don't practice at home. We still see progress in each lesson. I spend an hour with a student. We still see progress moving from week to week, even if they don't play a lot at home. So that sometimes takes a little bit for the parents to get used to as well. Now, if the student does play a lot at home, of course we see progress that will be a bit quicker, maybe going through the book. They'll come more prepared, but it's really okay to me if the student is enjoying the lessons, we're having a great time together, they are satisfied with what they're doing in the lessons. If they're not practicing a whole bunch at home, I'm okay with that.
And the thing about it is that the cool thing about it is that most of them just start practicing at some point.
They do.
They just like, I want to play this, so I'm going to play this. And that's really kind of like the challenge of the teacher is like, how do I get my students to want to practice? And we could have a whole episode about that, but there's like these three like main facts about practicing. It's like you have to want to do it. So like the activity has to be motivating, let's say. And then the other is you have to understand what it is you're doing. And you have to feel confident in your abilities and your skills. And that is what audiation gives to the student to make them want to go practice, is that they understand what they're doing. They understand how to approach the instrument with tonal patterns and rhythm patterns, and they want to use that to make up their own music all the time, and they just do it. And then the third like pillar of practice success is having the time and like not being overscheduled, and that's kind of an obvious one. But those are like the three factors in is a student going to practice or not.
And is this something that you've developed out of observation, or is that something that you're citing?
This is actually, I'm sort of paraphrasing some things that Jana Olson has said about practicing. And Jana Olson is another member of the Music Learning Academy team and like Gimmel favorite. She's one of my Gimmel favorites. But she has spoken about practice, and I sort of narrowed it down to like, yeah, it's got to be these three. And I think she said basically the same thing. It comes down to having the time, understanding what you're supposed to be doing, and then wanting to do it.
Yeah. I know this is not strict music learning theory discussion, but I think that's fascinating, the baggage that we traditionally do attach to that word practice. And I don't know how familiar you are with stuff that's been done on informal music learning. So learning outside of, formal settings in schools. But Lucy Green, she's a big name has done a lot of work in this idea of informal music learning, and she studied how popular musicians develop their skills and how they teach themselves and things, and that's one of the big characteristics that differentiates between formal and informal music learning is that in formal music learning, you're assigned to practice. It's often like you're going to practice this, this, and this. You're going to do these scales. And in informal music learning, it's much more learner-driven. It's I want to learn to play this lick in this tune, so I'm going to practice that lick. And like, that's how you build the skills, is through trying to figure out these, real life applications of music and like learn it. You have a goal in mind that you're working towards. And it sounds like that's, similar to what Hannah was saying about the pillars of practicing, but it's more like that learner focused and motivated informal music learning versus being assigned certain tasks to practice, and you see it as punishment almost.
Yeah,
anyway.
And this really can relate to music learning theory, because we're giving them the skills. We're giving them the vocabularies, the tonal and the rhythm vocabularies to go home and to say create. I can't tell you how many times I've started a class and a student will say, oh, listen to what I created this week, or listen to this. We've had whole recitals on just compositions or arrangements of folk songs that the students created. So, or, oh, I taught myself how to play the Zelda theme song. That's a very popular one, this week. Or I have another student who likes to play Coldplay songs, and they just go home and they listen and they teach themselves to play all of this music or to create all this music. So that's really exciting. And I think that's because of teaching with an MLT approach.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. So the two of you actually have your own podcast called Keys to Music Learning. How did that collaboration come about? How did you embark on that endeavor?
So Hannah and I both have a very obvious passion for music learning theory and for music moves for piano. I initially approached her to offer some webinars through Music Learning Academy, and we just immediately, we hit it off. We started talking about what else can we do to make audiation-based teaching accessible to teachers. So out of that conversation came Keys to Music Learning.
And so many other things.
Yeah, that's true.
But it started with the podcast, yes.
So what kinds of things do you talk about on Keys to Music Learning?
Well, our episodes in season 1 worked through how the learning sequence sort of plays out in music moves for piano. And we like to kind of organize things around a particular key. So like one key might be audiation, one key might be sequencing, get it, keys. And we also play piano keys. It's all wonderful.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, we see what we did there. And then we're also unlocking our students' musical potential. Yeah, we really take that key thing to the next level. But we started with our stories and just kind of explaining audiation and like getting the train on the track. And then we went into a whole series about informal guidance, and then another one about formal instruction, and like how to do informal guidance in the piano studio, and then and featuring keyboard games. And then also in the formal instruction, we went through all of the parts of the music moves lesson, which are activity time, keyboard geography and technique, exploration, creativity, improvisation, performance pieces and supplementary repertoire, and then the reading and writing notation books. And we just sort of gave a overview of that, and we're looking forward to season 2 now.
Yeah, and season 2 is going to begin soon, and it is all about community and learning from one another's experiences and expertise with audiation-based piano teaching. And we're just really excited to bring in, I think, some of the most knowledgeable teachers we know, as well as some really wonderful teachers who have more recently jumped into using the Music Moves for Piano method. And we just believe there's a lot to learn from one another, and also a lot of support to gain from this amazing community that we have.
Excellent. I'm excited to listen. That'll be very fun. So you've mentioned a few times Music Learning Academy. Krista, I know that's your business. Could you tell us a little bit about that and the kinds of things that you offer?
Sure. So I started Music Learning Academy, I guess it was almost 3 years ago, almost to the day, with the goal to make audiation-based teaching more accessible to teachers around the world, because I saw the interest was there. Many teachers wanted to do this. So I talked to Marilyn, and she gave me her blessing to create an online course for keyboard games. And I call that the Keyboard Games Comprehensive Course. Since then, Music Learning Academy has grown to offer webinars by a wonderful team of teachers, Hannah included, as well as Jana Olson, Jenny Fisher, Scarlett Kerr, Sarah McCaffrey-Ritchie, and of course, last but certainly not least, Marilyn Lowe. We run live interactive study groups to take deeper dives into the Music Moves for Piano materials, the skill learning sequence, and also I do tonality study groups as well. Hannah and I run a book club, we've mentioned, where we read Dr. Gordon's books together. And as one might guess, if you've read his books, we have amazing discussions. I'm currently finishing a Music Moves for Piano Book 1 online course. This was kind of delayed because of COVID, but I'm hoping to finish that soon and also start a Book 2 course later this year.
Excellent. And Hannah, I recently learned that you also have an online community. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. We are called For Inspiration, the number 4 inspiration, 4I. And I met some wonderful piano teachers at the 2018 professional development level course in piano level 1. And they're from Texas, so close to Louisiana. We bonded over our geographical locations, and we just started getting together on Zoom just to hang out and just talk to each other. It started with 3 of us, and then we later added another teacher who also is in Texas. And then 2020 happened, and we joined forces to create an online performance event to celebrate the kinds of things we do, which are like big, elaborate arrangements of folk tunes and taking repertoire and creating variations, and kind of like an alternative to more traditional performance scenarios. And we did a pilot, and then that became 4 seasonal events. And now we have a calendar of 4 events where students in our big event is ArrangeCon. It was the first event we did. And then we also have around Halloween, we do a costumes and concert, and students do a lot of spooky stuff at that event. And we have a Summer Stories, which is like a workshop of musical storytelling. And then we're about to have one. We're piloting our 4th and final event in just a couple of weeks. And it's called the Winter Piano Games. And so we have our Summer Stories and our Winter Games. And it's to feature keyboard skills. And the whole thing is like very game-like. And the students are really loving it. The teachers group, we're really loving it. And we also do something very cool at the beginnings of our meetings. We have sort of a standing meet time on Friday mornings. And if you can make it, you come. And if you can't make it, you don't come. But there's always a Zoom happening on Friday mornings with a bunch of MLT piano teachers. And we start by improvising for each other. So we use the projects right now we're working through book 4 and 5. We finished book 4. We're working through book 5 of Music Moves, just doing the exploration, creativity, improvisation projects. And we take about 10 minutes to read through the instructions and kind of piece together what we're going to play. And then we take turns playing for each other. And it's just such a great way to cap off the week. And if anybody out there is interested in something like this, we have a website, and it's forinspiration.org, number 4.
That sounds very fun. I will be sure to link to that in the show notes, and I'll link to Music Learning Academy as well in case anyone wants to check that out. Well, I would like to close with one more question, and that is, what is your favorite part of teaching piano with MLT, or teaching with MLT in general?
Just everything. Yeah, mainly, I guess like the big answer is that it just works so well on so many levels where other things don't work as well that I've tried. And I love that my students they're learning this way, and I'm really glad that they're learning this way, but I'm also a little bit selfish about all of this, because another favorite thing about MLT is that my personal musicianship is growing, and we kind of touched on this earlier. And not only that, but I find myself making these like really deep and meaningful analogies, and of course I'm not going to think of one right now, but there's like these deep, meaningful analogies that can be made between things that Dr. Gordon writes and has shared with us and life. And, you know, like we know what something is by what it is not. I can't tell you how many applications in my life that has had that are non-musical. He's just such a genius. And I've gained a lot of confidence. Like I was able to see what my musical deficiencies are and were. And that was hard. It's always hard to face your deficiencies, especially about the thing that is like your whole life, which is music. But it made me face them. And then it didn't just leave me hanging there. It didn't just leave me hanging there. It gave me a path to kind of like go down some corrective strategies that could improve tuning, improve rhythm, improve my musicality, improve like being able to hear chord changes and hear that something's in Dorian tonality or whatever it might be. And it just made music more fun for me and more enjoyable for me. And so it's great that my students are getting all this great teaching and learning experience from me, but it also is great that I get to do it for myself. And I know that a lot of people are put off by just the overwhelming multitude of concepts and things to know about music learning theory, but I kind of love that. That's kind of like part of the thrill for me, is that like there's this never-ending rabbit hole, and I'm always learning. I'm never bored. I'm so willing to go down that rabbit hole, and it's just been a real game changer. And I know it takes a lot of work to cultivate that understanding and how to apply it in your music instruction, but that is kind of part of the thrill for me. And I love that the learning doesn't stop. And Rachmaninoff has this quote that music is enough for a lifetime is not enough for music. And I also feel that way about music learning theory is enough for a lifetime. I'm never bored.
That's fantastic. How about you, Krista? What's your favorite part about teaching with MLT?
I was going to say it's difficult to narrow down all the amazing moments, but I feel like Hannah covered 90% of them. So I don't have too much to add. But really, there's so many amazing moments that happen in lessons. And of course, there's various reasons as to why they happen. But no lie, every day I teach, I think to myself at least once, oh, this is brilliant. Like at least once. But I guess maybe it can all be wrapped up into the fact that my favorite part of teaching piano with MLT is that it's fun. The ease of learning, right? The understanding the students develop, the general lack of frustrations, the richness of the music that we just all make and create together. I think it's just plain fun for all of us involved.
I second that. I can't, I had a huge realization that I made, was realizing that a lot of times in the last 4 or 5 years, my students walk out the door or they leave their Zoom lesson, and they say things like, that was fun. Or like, they're not telling me that. They're like walking out with a parent and I hear them say, oh, that was so fun. Or they come in and they say, I've been creating this song in my head while I was in the car ride over here. You want to hear it? And these things just did not happen before MLT. And
yeah, we get a lot of like, wait, lesson time's over already?
Oh, yes. I don't want to go.
No, they don't want to go. They would say, I think a majority of my students would stay in the lesson for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. And be completely, they stay with me for an hour and they still say, oh, wait, it's time to go. They would stay for 2 hours and I would welcome them and I would have activities for them to keep them engaged for 2 hours as well.
That's amazing. Love it. Well, this has been so much fun. I've appreciated hearing from the two of you and everything that you've got going on. It's so exciting. What is the best way, if anyone wants to connect with either of you, what's the best way for them to reach out or to get involved?
I'd say if they are on Facebook, they can join our group. Hannah and I are admins for, it's a very long name. Get ready for it. You might want to link to it. It's Introduction to Audiation-Based Piano Instruction and Music Moves for Piano. But that is the perfect way to ask questions, dive into discussions. Even if you're not doing this yet, join the group, ask questions, learn from what we're talking about. There's also a guide with lots of videos and information on how to get started. And Hannah and I are on there often and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to the two of you.
Thank you so much for having us, Heather.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Well, I really enjoyed that conversation with Krista and Hannah, and I hope you did too. As Krista mentioned, she is a GIML faculty member and teaches professional development levels courses for GIML. GIML has recently announced its offerings for the summer of 2022, and Krista will be teaching Piano Level 1 outside of Boston in August, along with Jana Olson, whom she mentioned in the episode. At the same site, they'll also be hosting a brand new Piano Level 2, which will be taught by Marilyn Lowe and Jenny Fisher. I'll link to the listing of all of GIML's Summer 2022 PDLC offerings in case you'd like to check them out and make plans to attend. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, please get in touch. You can email me or send me a voice memo at everydaymusicality@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and let's keep musicking every day.